Hi again everyone. So today is going to be another theory lesson, and today it is all about motivations. So motivation is what gets your dog doing. Every single conscious behaviour will have an underlying motivation, and these can be either intrinsic or extrinsic. So before we get into those two types, firstly, you need to know that motivations continuously slide across a continuum or a hierarchy. So this means that what may have been really motivating at one point in time maybe isn't so motivating in a year or so, or even less. Motivations also differ between individuals. So every single dog will have their own scale of what motivates them, whether that's between cheese and Marmite or some other examples that we'll run into. So, like I mentioned, there are two types of motivator, and these are intrinsic or extrinsic. So, intrinsic motivations are behaviours that your dog will do just for the joy of doing them. So, these are things like chasing squirrels, for example. And I thought I would just show you an example hierarchy of what different intrinsic motivations could look like up here. So an example here might be that sniffing the ground, again, inherently an enjoyable behaviour, might be quite low on their intrinsic motivational hierarchy. But then going higher, you might have counter surfing, where they manage to get these tasty little tidbits without actually having to do much. It's just one of those behaviours that maybe isn't desirable for us. Or, for example, playing with other dogs. Again, another intrinsically enjoyable experience. And finally, you've got that really high drive of chasing squirrels or deer or other prey animals that they just do for the love of doing it, for running around like a lunatic on the tail of something that they might one day eventually catch. In contrast to this, you then have extrinsic motivators, which are things, like I said, that are applied by the outside world. So these usually require behaviours that are a bit more indirect, that don't get them joy straight away. And these can be shown through behaviours such as a chin rest or even a sit on cue. Things that they're doing to make us do something, and that is us giving them these extrinsic motivators. So again, here's another example pyramid just up here. And this one shows you that maybe the least motivating on the pyramid is your vocal praise. So a good boy, good girl, despite the tone that you might use. Or the next level up, say, might be physical praise. So having a good old cuddle or a belly scratch, that's something that might motivate them, but maybe isn't the most motivating thing out there. Up from that, then you might have toys, so playing with you, playing tug of war, playing fetch, anything that's building that bond, that's engaging you both in a really good play. And then even higher than that, you might actually find some highly salient food rewards. That's things like Marmite and cheese. If you're wondering where kibble falls on that, it's usually a little bit lower, but again, will completely depend on the dog that you have and will change over time. So, how do we use this to our advantage? Well, you need to think about what you're actually asking your dog to do and how high their intrinsic motivations are before we start thinking about what extrinsic motivator we can apply. So, for example, if you are just at home, very few distractions around, intrinsic motivations are going to be quite low. They don't really want to do anything because there's nothing around that will really get their gears going. So, if we're just asking for a nice, easy behaviour, we can look quite low down on that extrinsic motivational pyramid. So sometimes things like the kibble will be enough. Even as they get older and these behaviours become easier, things like a good boy, good girl, again, will be enough because we don't need to contend with anything that's really going on in the external environment. In contrast to that, if you take your dog out on a free run and you know that there are deer in the field beyond, or you see a dog on the horizon that they might want to go and play with, your dog's intrinsic motivation to go off and charge after something is going to be really high. But we don't want them to go off and charge after that thing. We want to battle against their intrinsic motivation to do that. So in reply to that, we need a very high extrinsic motivation. So this is why in those situations, if your dog has a high drive to chase after something, I'll probably say, okay, we need to up the saliency of the food reward, or we need to crack out the honky pigs, because they're a really good extrinsic motivation that get a lot of dogs going. So on the back of this, I want you all to think about what your dog's motivations are right at this very point in time. Regardless of how old your dog is, I want you to have a think about really what gets them going. And I want you to think about both intrinsic factors and extrinsic factors. If you want, you can draw them up in the pyramid style that I've shown you today. And ideally, I would like either 1 or 2 pyramids. So you can either combine intrinsic and extrinsic together into one pyramid. So for example, you might have squirrels right at the very top, slightly under that some cheese, or they might flip. Just really think about what motivates your dog. Once you've drawn them up, even if it's just a rough sketch on a bit of paper, send them across to me or Leanne and we can have a look, because that will really help us out when we're building our training plans for your dogs, should anything go slightly awry. And it will also help you to think about when you're next out and about with them in terms of what rewards you need to bring with you. So hopefully it helps, and I look forward to seeing all of those pyramids come in. So enjoy and speak to you soon. Bye.